My apologies for the obnoxious smirk when I was taking the little thumbnail shot. I was just thinking about how much I'm looking forward to reading. And I hope that people are enjoying the ongoing presentation of the novel Anyone Got a Match by Max Schulman. And we move into chapter 8. This could be a long one or a short one, depending on how much I feel like reading this time, because I'm kind of in the zone at the moment. We will see. I mean, you can see the little minutes, and I don't know what it's going to be as I record, so you know, and I don't. All right, chapter 8. True, Jefferson Tatum was not aware of Gabriel's paternity, but he was nonetheless the cause of Gabriel's being, just as he was the cause of everything else that came to be in Owens Mill. In 1939, the business offices of the Tatum Cigarette Company were jammed helter-skelter in odd corners of the factory and the warehouse. Then, in the autumn of 1939, Jefferson went to Winston-Salem to discuss industry matters with his colleagues at the R.J. Reynolds Company, and he saw their home office for the first time, the R.J. Reynolds Building, 21 imposing stories of Indiana limestone. Jefferson was pensive when he returned to Owens Mill. He summoned his executives to a meeting. "Fellers," he said, "I'm going to build me an office building." The executives beamed. Even the most senior of them had never had an office to himself. "How big a building are you planning?" asked the vice president in charge of sales. "I don't care," said Jefferson, "just so it's bigger than the R.J. Reynolds building." The comptroller blanched. "But, sir," he protested, "the Reynolds building is 21 stories." "Mine will be 31, said Jefferson. "What in the world do we need with all that space?" asked the comptroller, getting nervouser. "Shut up," said Jefferson. "Yes, sir," said the comptroller. "What costs more than limestone?" asked Jefferson. "Oh, lots of things," said the vice president in charge of engineering. "For example, if a man really wanted to go crazy, there's marble." "That's it," said Jefferson. "Make it out of marble. 31 stories tall, and way up on top I want a big red light that goes round and round and round." "But, sir," said the comptroller. "Meeting adjourned," said Jefferson. Ground was broken for the Tatum Tower 6 months later. By the end of 1941, the skeleton of 14 stories had been completed. Then the contractor came to Jefferson, shuffling his toe with embarrassment. "Mr. Tatum," he said sheepishly, "I can't get no more steel." "Why the hell not?" asked Jefferson. "On account of the war." "We'll see about that," said Jefferson grimly, and caught the first train to Washington. He called on his congressman, the Honorable Mr. Pettigrew, a portly gentleman of 70, now serving his 12th term, who wore a black suit, a white topcoat, a string tie, a long hairdo, and a perpetual smile. "Jefferson," said Mr. Pettigrew reasonably, "you know I'd like nothing in the world better than to help you, but there's a war going on." "I know there's a war going on, you overweight peckerhead," said Jefferson to the Honorable Mr. Pettigrew. "Ain't my factory working 3 shifts to help out our boys in the trenches?" "I do not minimize, mark you, the importance of cigarettes to the morale of our gallant young warriors," replied the congressman. "But to obtain steel these days, you must have a reason that is, shall we say, more military." "All right, then, find me some military outfit that can use the Tatum Tower, only for the duration, of course." "A military outfit in the Tatum Tower? I don't see how I can swing it, Jefferson." "Too bad," said Jefferson. "Washington ain't going to seem the same without you next term." I'll swing it, said Mr. Pettigrew hastily. The congressman promptly paid visits to the Army and the Navy, but all his rolling oratory failed to persuade them that the tide of victory clearly depended on completing the Tatum Tower. At the Air Force, however, Mr. Pettigrew struck pay dirt. The Air Force, for so many years the neglected orphan of the services, had suddenly become the pampered darling. It had only to ask, and it was given. Naturally, like any spoiled brat, the more it was given, the more it asked. Thus, when the winged generals heard about 31 stories of marble available in a place called Owens Mill, their eyes grew as bright as the stars on their shoulders. A new area command was created within minutes, headquarters, the Tatum Tower. And of course, one can hardly have an Air Force area command without an airfield, so Jefferson Tatum patriotically sold the United States 5,000 acres of bog just outside the town. Quickly, there was steel to complete the Tatum Tower. There was also concrete to lay the runways for the shiny new airplanes, and there was wood to build the barracks to house the troops who kept them flying. A certain Private Ira Shapian, assigned to special services because of his theatrical experience, was given the task of delivering a series of lectures on why we fight. This he did with such skill and fervor that every soldier present was passionately aware of why he fought. Nobody ever learned, however, who he fought. While Ira and his colleagues manned their posts with exemplary zeal, others in Owens Mill also contributed their bit to the war effort. Each Sunday, the gentry of the town opened their great houses to the lonely soldier boys at the base, except for Jefferson to the war effort. Each Sunday, the gentry of the town opened their great houses to the lonely soldier boys at the base, except for Jefferson Tatum, who never allowed visitors in his house. Unless you count Millie and Esther McCabe, the Round-Heel twins, from packaging, but they were always required to leave before cockcrow. Virgil Tatum, however, held open house every Sunday. Virgil, of course, was not in the service. He was 4F because of his gimpy leg. William Ransom Owens also opened his house on Sundays. William Ransom was 4F too because his testicles had never descended. And another who entertained on Sundays was Boo. Boo had been 18 years old, a second semester freshman at Wellesley, when she had received the shocking news that both of her parents had died in an automobile accident. She rushed back to Owens Mill in time for the funeral. Afterward, she stayed a couple of weeks for the grim legal necessaries that followed death. Then she prepared to return to Wellesley, but to her astonishment, she found she did not want to leave. It came to her suddenly that she was of Owens Mill. Her place was here. She had no brothers or sisters, and it seemed all wrong, she could not say exactly why, to trust executors with duties and obligations for which she had been born. She unpacked and stayed. She became, it happened effortlessly, the mistress of her house and estate, a club woman, a doer of good deeds, a worker for civic betterment and cultural enhancement. And 1 year later, when the Air Force moved into town, Boo, like her friends and kinfolk, held open house each Sunday. Ira Shapian met Boo at one of her Sunday at-homes. Ira was with Polly and several other GIs and their wives when he arrived. At first, he did not see Boo. He was too overcome by the house itself to notice anything else. Never had he seen a home so expensively appointed, yet so warmly inviting. He knew the chairs were priceless, but he would not have hesitated to flop in any of them, nor would he have shrunk from plunking down a drink on one of the irreplaceable tables. He, Ira Shapian, the Armenian kid from 10th Avenue, felt perfectly easy in this perfectly magnificent house. In fact, he had a sudden, powerful conviction that here, among this unaccustomed splendor, he, the groaner and breast beater, could find true tranquility for the first time in his whole spiky life. Then he was introduced to Boo. His black eyes widened with a strange mixture of awe and desire. Boo was the house was Boo. Just as he found the house at once dumbfounding and cozy, he saw Boo as a great patrician, touch-me-not lady who, he was dead sure of it, had been put on earth expressly for his pleasure. Whoa, boy. Steady, boy, he told himself firmly. First of all, you're a married man with a wonderful wife whom you love with all your black hairy heart. Second, you are all wrong about this Dame Boo. She is way out of your league, and if you make a pass at her, she will brush you off like a fly. Steady, boy. Oh, boy. Yet he kept returning to Boo's house on Sundays. He interspersed the visits with calls on Virgil Tatum or the various Owenses because he wanted to be sure to throw Polly off the scent. No simple matter, for Polly had a nose almost as smart as her head. Every time he saw Boo, the certainty returned that she was meant for him. He watched her closely as he told wry anecdotes of the theater and of his boyhood on the streets. He noted her big, free, open, unself-conscious laughter, and he was all the more positive that she would not say him nay. In Ira's experience, beautiful women did not laugh unguardedly. It cracked the facade. It left them vulnerable. Therefore, Boo's laughter could only mean that in her heart she did not want to protect herself from Ira. She was his. He knew it. He knew it. He knew it. And his soul soared with the joy of it. But when he was away from Boo, another thought would come to Ira, a thought that chilled his liver and frosted his lights. Idiot, he yelled at himself. Dumbhead. You've got to wonder a darling, sensational, perfect wife, but you are falling in love with a princess with the golden hair. You will never have her. She doesn't even know you exist, or if she does, she thinks of you as some kind of grimy little joke maker from the New York pavements. Dumbhead. Idiot. Dumb idiot head. What Ira could not know was that Boo was falling in love with him too. All her post-pubescent life, she had been courted by Southern men, and they had always made her feel vaguely inadequate. Southern men, including lame Virgil, were basically Elizabethans. They fought fearlessly, copulated tirelessly, hunted skillfully, drank prodigiously. They were equally competent behind a shotgun or a desk. They shunned self-pity. They embraced strength. Ira, on the other hand, was a woe shouter who wore his weakness proudly. There was something little boy about him, something that clutched the maternal strings in Boo's heart. She knew that to him she would be necessary. She would be more than an appendage, more than the chatelaine a Southern male would make of her. But of course, it was not even thinkable to reveal her feelings to Ira. He was a married man. Moreover, Boo was genuinely fond of Polly, whom she found to be a willing, cheerful co-worker in all of Owens Mill's worthy projects. The hospital, the blood bank, the orphanage, the manifold fund drives. She was, besides, a witty, amusing, dear, upright woman, whose love for Ira was plain to see. No, thought Boo, good sense, good taste, and good breeding all told her the same thing. Hands off Ira. So good sense, good taste, and good breeding all told her the same thing. Hands off Ira. So the tacit romance between Boo and Ira dragged on. Pain burgeoned, but no word was spoken, not on either side. Then Polly got pregnant, doubly pregnant, grotesquely pregnant, grotesquely pregnant. She gave up civic virtue and stayed at home, groaning when she was not actually vomiting. Her temper, never long, got steadily shorter. Ira looked at tall, slender, elegant, beautiful Boo. Then he looked at sullen, swollen Polly. Then he did some groaning himself. When Polly went home to New York to give birth to the twins, Ira, after a fierce losing battle with himself, paid a visit alone at night to Boo's house. Ira, she said, startled, what do you want? I don't know, he said. Then suddenly, wildly, they were in one another's arms. And then they were on a couch, grabbing, sobbing, tearing, grabbing. No, no, cried Boo, pulling away. Yes, yes, cried Ira. I mean, yes, yes, said Boo. But you said no, no, said Ira. I mean, yes, yes, said Boo, but not here, not in this house. Where, said Ira. Come, said Boo. Yes, yes, said Ira. He followed Boo to her car. Where, said Ira. Come, said Boo. Yes, yes, said Ira. He followed Boo to her car, and they sped, tight-lipped and trembling, to her deserted beach house 10 miles away. There, on a bearskin rug in front of a driftwood fire, it was done. In fact, it was done several times, but always with tears, always with a sense of transgression hanging over them like a dark canopy. We can't do this to Polly, they kept telling each other over and over, and each time, having reached agreement, they fell once more to the pelt before the hearth. 2 days and 2 nights they cried and made love. Then, serious and sated, they exchanged a solemn promise. They would never see one another again. They would never write, never phone, never send a message through an intermediary. They had sinned against Polly and against God. Separation, permanent and irrevocable, would be their punishment. This they swore. They kept their oath. This night, 18 years later, Ira was in Hollywood and Boo stood alone in the bedroom of her home in Owens Mill, and not once in the 18 years had there been any sort of contact between them. Boo turned away from her bedroom window, where she had been gazing across the countryside at the Tatum Tower. How ironic, she thought, that an innocent victim should be paying the heaviest price for her sin and Ira's. It was not she and not Ira from whom the cruelest toll was being exacted. It was their son, Gabriel. His awesome punishment was that he would never know his father. A bribed judge and a forged marriage license had given the boy legitimacy, but it would never give him the joy of clasping Ira to his bosom, of exchanging the tears and kisses that erupted so naturally from their volatile hearts. Was Ira, too, paying a frightful price? Boo could not be sure, but she fervently hoped he was not. She wanted only happiness for him. She had never told him about Gabriel, nor would she. His all-too-fragile conscience could not bear such an affliction. Let him be peaceful. Let him rejoice in his professional success, in his marriage with good, honest Polly, in his two stalwart sons. As for herself, she was content. Had she not earlier this night counted her blessings and found them abundant? She would never, yet she was content. Not entirely, of course. She would never stop grieving for Ira, but she would grieve sweetly, indeed, grieve lyrically. She moved to her little white desk. A sonnet for the mermaid was stirring in her mind. She took out a sheaf of foolscap and uncapped a pen. She wrote a title at the top of the page, On the Blessings of Sin. She signed her nom de plume by Leda. She closed her eyes, thought deeply, then began. The pain delights, the jubilee is triste. A lover's moon mounts blackly in the east. She leaned back and appraised the opening couplet. Not bad, she decided. In fact, rather good. Nice touch, that triste. Rich imagery, that moon rising blackly. Yes, thought Boo, this could well be one of Leda's better efforts. Yes. Chapter 9. At 4:20 of an autumn afternoon, a black suit containing Harry Clendenin, president of the Star-Spangled Broadcasting Network, boarded the first-class compartment of TWA flight number 11, nonstop Idlewild to Los Angeles. Already aboard the plane, waiting for Clendenin was his secretary, Haas by name, a man of 30 with pale eyebrows, thin shoulders, invisible lips, a black suit, and an attaché case lying open on his knees. Clendenin never hired women as secretaries because women, no matter how prominently they started, promisingly, they started case lying open on his knees. Clendenin never hired women as secretaries because women, no matter how prominently they started, promisingly they started, always ended up behaving like women. They wanted, for instance, to leave the office before midnight, or they insisted on Sundays off, or they fell in love, or their ovaries got murky, always something. The only kind of secretary to have, Clendenin frequently told his friends at the National Association of Broadcasters, is a non-practicing faggot. As the jet reached cruising altitude, Clendenin unfastened his seatbelt and turned to Haas. All right, Chickie, he said, let's get cracking. Yes, sir, said Haas. Memos, correspondence, pencils, pens, and pads were neatly arranged on his attaché case. He picked up the top memo on his attaché case. He picked up the top memo. General Motors, Coca-Cola, and Goodyear tires have each placed an order for that unsold minute on Rocky Gibraltar. Tell them all yes, said Clendenin. Next. A little reckless, isn't it, sir? Selling the same spot to 3 different sponsors? That's showbiz, baby. Next. Mrs. Clendenin wants to know whether you'll be back from California in time for the cotillon. Tell her yes. Next. You know, of course, said Haas impassively, that you won't be home in time. What I know, pussycat, is that people don't like to be told no. Next. I called Mr. Shapian for you again, and again he refused to accept the call. This, according to my records, is the 8th consecutive day he has refused your calls. Perfidious Armenian, snarled Clendenin. What the hell is he up to? Excuse me, sir, but isn't it rather obvious? Mr. Shapian's contract is due for renewal next month. He's attempting, you might say, a war of nerves in order to get more money. Brilliant ducks. Only trouble is I've already offered him more money. Oh, said Haas. No, something else is on Ira's mind. Something deep, real deep. I'll tell you how deep it is. I happen to have definite information that he's been showing up at the office in a houndstooth jacket. Shocking, said Haas politely. Well, never mind. I've handled Shapian before, and I'll do it again. What's next? Mr. Davies sent you this memo. Oh, said Clendenin, sitting upright. His ruddy face went suddenly pale. A shadow of fear scurried across his hard, flat eyes. Clendenin was president of Star-Spangled, but Mr. Davies was owner of the network. Mr. Davies was, in addition, a vestryman of his church, a trustee of his university, and the master of his regatta. He was an aloof, austere sort who never sent memos to his employees except when he was displeased about something, and if he was sufficiently displeased, he would aloofly, austerely have a man's head on a platter. Clendenin cast out fear, the enemy of thought, for he needed to think. What could be irking Mr. Davies? Certainly, it was not that he had gotten word of some of Clendenin's chicaneries. It was specifically to chicane that Mr. Davies had engaged Clendenin in the first place. Mr. Davies preferred to let hirelings do his throat-slitting, while he stayed clean-handed above the fray, vestryman, trustee, and master of the regatta. No, it could be only one thing, Ira Shapian. Sure, Ira Shapian. Now Clendenin understood why Ira had been ducking his phone calls. Now he knew precisely what game Ira was playing. He was, as Haas had said, conducting a war of nerves, except the war was not against Clendenin, but against Mr. Davies. For all his aloofness and austerity, Mr. Davies kept an unsleeping eye on his network. Nothing large or small ever escaped his surveillance. He was fully aware that Ira was giving Clendenin a frost. He was further aware that Ira, the man who could nice, was worth his weight in rubies to the network. So foolish Ira was trying to panic Mr. Davies into believing he would not renew his contract as long as Clendenin was in charge. So feckless Ira was hoping to stampede Mr. Davies into firing Clendenin. That's it, all right, thought Clendenin, confidence flooding back to his breast. That's it, and I've got nothing to worry about. When it comes to a contest of finkery between Ira and me, why, it's just no contest. I'll handle Ira. I'll hold my job, and I'll also hold that crazy Armenian. Nobody outthinks Clendenin, no sir. Not old Clendenin, the survivingest predator in the whole TV jungle. Okay, doll, said Clendenin to Haas. Read me Mr. Davies' memo. Yes, sir. Haas held up a sheet of paper and read. Mr. Jefferson, where am I here? Okay, and read. Mr. Jefferson Tatum of the Tatum Cigarette Company phoned me this morning and asked me to clear 60 minutes of prime broadcast time for a program that will emanate from Acanthus College. The topic will be the dangerous additives commonly found in food. I agreed to Mr. Tatum's request. Two emotions hit Clendenin simultaneously. First, there was relief that Mr. Davies still had not learned about Ira Shapian's recalcitrance. Second, there was annoyance that Mr. Davies should have said yes to Jefferson Tatum. God damn it, Clendenin exclaimed to Haas. How can we do a program about poisonous food additives? We've got $40 million a year in General Foods billings. Haas, without a pause, continued to read from Mr. Davies' memo. Yes, I know we've got $40 million a year in General Foods billings. I also know that the 6 lowest rated shows on the network are sponsored by Jefferson Tatum. You will therefore produce the program Mr. Tatum has requested. You will, of course, find somebody to present a rebuttal for the food industry during the program. Please take great pains to find a rebutter who is homesy, folksy, winsome, and trustworthy. Make sure his eyes are not shifty and that he does not perspire. Clendenin grinned. No fool, Mr. Davies. Is that the end of the memo? He asked. One more line, replied Haas. He quoted, P.S. Why do we still not have Ira Shapian's signature on the new contract? I should be most unhappy to lose him to another network. Men like Shapian are rather more difficult to replace than men like you. Best wishes, Davies. A tremor of fright rippled through Clendenin. He cursed himself for being so stupid as to believe Mr. Davies was unaware of the trouble with Shapian. And yet, thought Clendenin, with rising spirits, he really had no reason to panic. One way or another, he would keep Ira in the fold. He had done it a dozen times in the past. He would do it again. Of this he had no doubt. All right, sweetie, he said amiably to Haas. What's next? Haas lifted a memo with a faint air of distaste. I have been in touch with your Hollywood procurer, he said. A lady will be at your suite between 5 and 6 on Thursday afternoon. I am told she works with patent leather boots and a can of Ready Whip. Cancel it, said Clendenin. Too busy. Haas regarded his employer with something almost like respect. Yes, sir. Next? That's all. Mask and pills, said Clendenin. Yes, sir, said Haas, and handed him a black eye shade and a vial containing 1 capsule each of Seconal, Milton, Lyrian, and chloral hydrate. Clendenin swallowed the pills, tilted his chair back, slipped the mask over his eyes, and enjoyed a health-restoring nap from Cleveland to Los Angeles. We are not yet halfway through the novel. At the halfway point, I'll pause briefly, offer a thought or two, and invite discussion, although you're always welcome to comment. And then we will resume after that to complete the story. Thank you for listening.